Hi, while going through the internet, you will often come across the videos by white people criticizing immigration. While it makes some sense for people to be upset about massive immigration in their societies, but that is not the only issue at hand. The issue is about the belief that white culture is superior to other cultures. This may sound a little truthful at first, but then one notices a lot of different issues plaguing the white culture. And it seems that there is a greater examination needed. It will often be surprising, yet evidently clear, that if you inspect white culture, you would know that most of the moral stands of the white culture do not derive themselves from moralism, but derive themselves from what appears to be emotionally viable position. Let us take a look at one of these things. So this is the podcast by Loris Eaters. It is basically an anti-immigration podcast. Herein, they share a news article about a 34-year-old Nigerian man who was arrested for flirting with a minor just few weeks after his arrival to the UK. Now, let us consider the Western society. Even though people are calling for this man to be deported, let us understand that minors, that is, people who are below the 18 years of age in UK, do undergo a lot of flirtation and sexual activity. This is evidently clear in the statistics. But one can here take a position that even though that is surely the case, children are off limits. So, of course, what this 34-year-old man was doing, even though it was basically just flirting, it was a very deep offense, and hence he is an animal and he needs to be deported. But let us just stop there for a moment. Let us ask this very simple question. Is this the natural position of the Britishers in almost every such case, every such adult interaction with a minor? Or this breeds some peculiar whiff of something that is kind of based on the gender and the race of the perpetrator? Let us take a look at another report. This report is about a woman who was charged for making sexually abusing explicit content of 2-year-old daughter for money. Now notice this news article. It is not just flirtation, it is sexual abuse, it is recording and streaming of explicit content, and it is doing this all for money. And here the person who is being abused is not a teen who is involved in sexual activities. Probably. But this is a 2-year-old daughter. Someone probably who is very, very far away from puberty or any sexual understanding. The question here is that does this second example feel like something which is coming just as an accident? Or there seems to be, as you would often know if you go through the quips by white people, is very differential standard when it is the women who are committing sexual abuse against boys or even men, and when white people do the same thing. If this example of a 34-year-old Nigerian man flirting with a teen is an example of black culture, why women making obscene content, women roaming around half naked, women sexually abusing men, and people defending it by claiming that it works differently, and women abusing boys and doing all of this for money? How is that not white culture? In fact, before all the values that were propagated by whites in their countries or in other countries, this type of activity was very limited. Probably it was so limited that the whole case of feminists was that women's sexuality was being suppressed. Notice how the standards immediately change. In a culture which is sexually liberal, people are angry and believe it is animal-like to be engaged in flirtation, even though, of course, that is clearly a one-way street. But in that same culture, you would often see comments literally defending women who are engaged in non consensual sexual acts with men, or consensual or even non consensual sexual acts with minors. And there seems to be, there's little doubt about it, and it is acknowledged by even certain people who are white, that there is a clear difference, marked difference, in the treatment in both of the cases. The first case, where the man is the perpetrator, the second case, where the woman is the perpetrator. Should we ask ourselves that this moralism against pedophilia by the whites, why it has to be defensive of actual pedophilia? Why it has to get itself angry at flirtation, but unfortunately be very weak and kind of defenseless, even if it's against actual pedophilic actions by women, by white women, by their own women, and funnily enough, even if those actions are committed against white boys or men. One must understand this whole idea of the white culture, which is both prude and perverted, and proudly so in both of these cases, and influenced in these cases by feminism, is not just anti anyone who is not white. It treats them as animal first and then gives an explanation later. But it treats them in the same way. But none of the people who are engrossed in this society care about it, because they have two excuses. The first excuse is men are bad or they are different than women. And the second excuse, which is often given in these kind of cases, is this is just the reality of the world, which is kind of strange because none of the values which are propagated by whites in last 3 or 4 centuries had any resemblance to the natural order. It must be kept in mind and be understood that a civilization that is very much angry at a pedophilia of some kind, even if that pedophilia is lesser kind, but is very angry, is not at pedophilia of one kind, but not angry at pedophilia of the other kind, which is even a grosser pedophilic act, then such a civilization is not merely pedophilic and the people pedo apologist, but such a civilization is intentionally so. It must not be viewed through the lens of just being kind of like a pedophile or even an intentional pedophile. It must be viewed through the lens of a person or the civilization which is pedophile for the reason that it wants to exercise that pedophilia even in the absence of the sexual temptation. It is the evilmost kind of pedophilia. It is the pedophilic character, not a pedophilic desire. And such is the cornerstone of the white culture. A lot of whites may disagree with this, but it is very clear, even if you go through a cursory glance of social media, or even the actual population, or even the legal systems, there's a widespread difference in the adoption of perverted or the prude attitude by whites, specifically in certain situations, which of course I covered here, and I need not cover again, that is purely based on intentional victimization of a certain group and aggressive protection of another group to the point of demonizing the so-called perpetrators. This is the definition of the white culture. It's essentially pedophilic action dialed to the max, which needs to be against pedophilia to support or defend or propagate it by adopting an alibi.